Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Yeah, guys, welcome once again to the NPTEL module on strategic trade and protectionism. We are on lecture number 25, week number 5, where we have been discussing terms of trade and its connection to the strategy of international trade. Now, in this particular lecture, I am trying to clarify the concept related to determinants and impacts or the effects of terms of trade. It has been observed largely that the terms of trade has huge implications for the developing country, and there are many theories developed accordingly, like immersionizing growth rate, as I mentioned earlier, proposed by Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, but it was way back 1957, 58 where the theories were developed. Now, so therefore, the lecture name is Terms of Trade, Determinants and Impacts. My name is Dr. Pratap Mohanty, Assistant Professor, Department of Humanities and Social Science, IIT Roorkee. Now, to understand the impact or the determinants correctly, this diagram though we have already discussed, so better to re-emphasize further. This is in fact attaches the equilibrium price, though we derived from the offer curve arguments. Offer curve we have already discussed in this week only, that is very helpful in generalizing the international equilibrium price or the terms of trade. From the earlier argument, if you remember carefully, where we discussed the relative prices of the commodities and the relative prices of the commodities and the commodity X that is being demanded or supplied. Nation 1 we are considering here as the net supplier so far as commodity X is concerned, and next nation 2 is actually a country is the net demander. So, by the endowment argument we discussed earlier, which says that nation 2 is more endowed with the X variety of products to be produced. So, they are net exporters. The relative prices in those countries for those products for commodity X as compared to Y is cheaper. So, starting with 1/4 is the relative price. When it increases, nation 1 is the net supplier is actually ready to export. Okay. Now, similarly, when when the terms of trade as we discussed for nation 1 is of 1/4. So, terms of trade in nation 2 is of phi y by px. Since two countries we are concerned with, this is country 1 and so this is equal to 4. Now, given this, therefore, the supply curve actually supply starts at demand by the country 2 for countries 1 product is near about less, very near about 0, it starts from an infinite point. Now, once when the terms of trade of country 1 increases steadily, so the reverse is true where it falls for another country to import. So, therefore, there has been a countervailing forces that helps the countries to define an equilibrium price, and therefore, at certain level where excess demand is defined or observed for country for the commodity X, the same gets lessened, gets squeezed reaching at an equilibrium price, where equilibrium level of quantity demanded and imported and exported in an international level, and that determine an equilibrium terms of trade. And this is usually defined as a long run phenomena, which we have discussed, and accordingly various types of terms of trade and various instrument of measurement were developed. So, therefore, in the last class we talked about different types mentioned by Jacob Wiener and Gerald Mayer, where the terms of trade are broadly these categories and these categories. This is largely on commodity exchange, as I already mentioned. This is largely on productivity, productivity factor or productivity efficiency. This is largely opportunity cost. Opportunity cost of measurement, and usually defined in terms of utility, relative utility. So, therefore, this method is hierarchically important, important, and it attaches larger perspectives. Though each of the instrument has its own shortcomings, but the simplest method of measurement is nothing but the net barter terms of trade, and which is largely used in our discussion in many other discussion. So, now in this lecture we are emphasizing on what really influence the terms of trade, and after influence what really it impacts the terms of trade. If it is higher, is it favorable, is it lower, is it disfavorable or unfavorable. Now, determinants, what it affects, what are the causes of terms of trade, what are the factors of terms of trade. Now, I have mentioned so many factors based on the understanding from various perspectives. First factor is called reciprocal demand as a factor behind terms of trade. Reciprocal demand, one of the important instrument of reciprocal demand is elasticity of demand. Elasticity of demand for import as well as export, elasticity of export demand, elasticity of import demand. Now, so how it matters if the demand for exports of a country is actually less elastic, and if elasticity of exports demand of a country is less elastic, then the terms of trade will be in its favor. What do you mean by that? If elasticity stands for E of exports is less than 1, okay, and that will be good. This implies that Px by Py is relatively higher, it will be in favor of that country, because of the fact that if your product is inelastic, and by charging any form of taxes on it, by tariff on it, or any kind of disfavorable steps taken by the country, or the country, that will not reduce the export demand. So, in the international level your product is actually still demanded. So, that much of demand is still preserved or still expected. So, therefore, if your product is inelastic, what do you mean? What are the other interpretation of inelasticity? Other interpretations are like your product might be relatively different, might be qualitatively different, might attach certain imperfections in the international market, might be very differentiated, or might be having attached with or might be attached with certain extra features, monopolizing characteristics. So, therefore, it will attach higher price in the international market. Similarly, if the elasticity of demand is demand for your imports, the terms of trade will be favorable to a country whose demand for imports is more elastic. Demand for imports is more elastic. Suppose we are importing and that demand is very elastic in nature. So, that means if price increases, now what is going to happen? If it is just the reverse, if your import demand is very elastic, okay, suppose it is our not product, import demand of another product. So, our product in another country and they are and it is, and your importable wherever we import. So, basically or that is basically export, export in the international market. If the import product in the international market or the importable item in your international in the international market is very elastic. So, that is for sure is going to suppose for example, a tax is imposed or a tariff is imposed on the imports, and that will actually reduce the demand for imports. Okay. Therefore, for the domestic country it is going to be good, and since it is why it is good, because in so far as terms of trade is concerned, it will be favorable to the country since it is import elastic. On the other hand, if the demand for import is less elastic, that means it has monopoly power attached to it, and the monopoly power and its effects are derived by another country. So, other country whoever is exporting. So, terms of trade will be actually unfavorable. Similarly, this is one side of the story where we are emphasizing demand perspectives. What about supply? So, if supply is elastic, supply I mean the supply is itself is very elastic. The supply of exports is less elastic. The terms of trade will be unfavorable. I mean so far as demand is concerned, we found that it is favorable in some case, is if it is so in another case it is unfavorable if it is then 1. Now, whereas in the supply case, if your supply of export is actually our export is elastic in terms of I mean elastic, the terms of trade will be unfavorable. So, now how to interpret it actually? If your supply of exports is elastic, if price increases in the international market by 10%, your export will actually supply will be more than 10%. If your export supply is more than 10%, then it will reduce the price. It will reduce the net price in the international market. So, therefore, the Px by Py will be falling as a net effect. So, therefore, it will be unfavorable. If it is more elastic, if it is more elastic, the same will be favorable. I mean just the opposite aspect can be understood. Now, similarly, the supply of imports is less elastic. The if price of imports actually increases by 10%, the supply import supply is actually less than 10%, okay, increases, but less than 10%. The terms of trade will be favorable to the concerned country. It will be favorable, and because even if price increases, more supply is actually not added to the concerned country. So, therefore, it will be favorable to the concerned country. The supply of import is more elastic. Now, if price increases, but the supply actually increases more than that country will take more advantage. So, therefore, it will be unfavorable. This reverse can be also understood here. This is very interesting part so far as determinants of terms of trade is concerned, and which is concerned to elasticity of supply and elasticity of demand. Now, let us check with size of demand. The volume of demand really matters. With the increase in trade or increase in demand for exports of a country, prices of exports will actually increase as against the price of imports, and hence terms of trade is favorable. So, therefore, the size of demand really matters, not just the elasticity, the extent of demand is also very important. If the demand for imports increase, then it will be certainly unfavorable. Similarly, if you look at other factors, other factors like other factors of terms of trade like availability of substitutes. Now, if you have more substitutes, whatever imports we do, if imports have huge substitutes available, so why should we import on that particular import of that particular commodity? So, the relative price will actually fall in the international market for import. Okay, so, that will be favorable to the country's terms of trade. If the substitutes of the goods import become available in the same country, then terms of trade will be favorable to it, as I just mentioned. So, if the substitutes are I mean substitutes of goods exported, now import as against if it is exported and become available in the international market, then our terms of trade in the international market for its exports will actually be compared to lesser. So, it will be unfavorable. So, in case of exports, in case of imports, if substitutes are available, this will be unfavorable, I mean this will be favorable. In case of exports, exportable product, and if more substitutes are available for your exportable product in the international market, it will be unfavorable. This is what in short can be presented like this. Similarly, if you look at taste and preference of the people of a country, I mean if you look at correctly have a craze for imported goods, and they prefer strictly to their consumption of the importable basket. So, therefore, they demand the importable basket more strongly. So, it will negate our or it will disfavor or unfavorable to our terms of trade, because we have a strong taste and preference for specific product. So, if it is so, it will be actually unfavorable to our terms of trade. Now, similarly, if people have little preference to the imported goods, then it will be favorable for sure. Okay. So, these are the factors. Similarly, if you look at size of population, size I think is one of the most important determinants of international trade, and size really matters, size of population matter, that defines the market of a particular commodity. Usually India and China referred because of its very nature of population. The population by number is second largest. India is the second largest, followed by China, and so size of population themselves define the magnitude of demand for importable product. So, intensity of demand for importable goods is actually relatively more for a country which have large population. So, therefore, terms of trade will be different, and terms of trade, I mean if it is imported goods, intensity of demand for imported good is relatively more intensity. Now, I am emphasizing the elasticity patterns. So, if it is elastic, now if any relative price increases for the importable good, it will be favorable to the country's terms of trade, since population is more. So, wherever population is more, there are high chances of expecting the prices of import to be lesser, because they capture larger population. Terms of trade will be favorable for a country having small population. Now, argument is here, now depend upon volume of quantity consumed for importable, then it will be disfavorable to the country's terms of trade. Now, if it is small country, then the volume of consumption will be less for the importable product. But if you can have a better bargaining for the importable product, and there are large number of substitutes available, and our population used to get those substitutes available. So, then in that context, then it will be favorable. Otherwise, largely population demand hugely for the product, and if it is small country, then it is favorable for terms of trade. Okay. Similarly, there are other factors like change in the factory endowments and technology. Factory endowment or the resources used, with the increase in the availability of factory endowments and the use of improved technology. So, export will rise and then as compared to imports. So, that will be favorable to the country's terms of trade. And other things, keeping other things equal, effects of tariff, if it is there, tariff is there, tariff for a product, again it depends upon a small country and large country context, large versus small, which I have already discussed. Now, if it is a country is imposing, if the country is imposing duties or tariff, import falls. So, terms of trade will become favorable, since we can able to reduce the imports. But now look at what is going to happen if it is a large country as compared to small country. If a small country imposes tariff on the imports, or large number of duties are imposed. So, the terms of trade is not going to change for the country rest of the world, because of the fact that the country is not can able to influence the prices of the imports, or import prices are not changed, or the export or the terms of trade are not changed. So, therefore, small country is not going to impact. If it had been a large country, big country can have different consequences. So, for certainly if it is the country concerned and impose certain things, for that country it is beneficial, so favorable. So, devaluation. So, therefore, these are some strategies, imposing tariff or having certain new technologies, innovation. These are some strategies to derive benefits out of terms of trade. Devaluation, as we know, it is the official channel, the official pattern by which the currency rates are actually devalued, reduced. So, devaluation of exchange rate, or the exchange rate of the currency of the country depreciates. So, devalue actually depreciate the value of the currency. When we depreciate deliberately, what happens? The exports are usually expected to be higher, okay, because of the fact that more amount of product can be imported by the rest of the world with the same amount of money. So, export volume rise. So, if it has elasticity content, then total volume of income will be more and our product will be demanded. So, our prices will rise. So, that leads to favorable terms of trade. So, usually China often the case practices this, devalue their currency much a time, so that the terms of trade can be kept at a high level. So, otherwise it is unfavorable to some extent. Similarly, there are uncertainties if it is attached within the country, uncertainty, some kind of disturbances, some kind of wrong postulation, some kind of risk attached, then it will be often the case observed unfavorable to the terms of trade. Now, what about quality of the product? Now, though it is very difficult to discuss, now in the present days context, market context, trade is usually taking place in mostly in differentiated products, where the products are qualitated differently. If your products are attached with better quality, then it is favorable to the terms of trade. Now, similarly, expectations of future relationship. Now, as a strategy by many partner countries to develop some kind of tie-offs, some kind of group, some kind of cartelization, which has made the country to define their bargaining power of their exportable commodities. So, this makes them favorable in the international context. So far as their product bargaining is concerned, their product competitive advantage is concerned. So, expectation of future relationship will actually attach in future if they are attempting, for example, any kind of attempts, any kind of news you listen from US that India is going to have certain deals. So, then with the expectations expectations of better tie-up. So, there will be expectation of higher demand for our product, that will lead to higher terms of trade, that will be favorable usually. Similarly, wrong expectations or bad expectations will lead it to in a reverse stature. So, government policies usually matter a lot. So, a great deal of importance in the present days of research are on political aspects of determining terms of trade. So, the politics behind many policies implemented or are largely determining the productivity of the product and or largely determining the efficiency of the product or the factors, or it has better bargaining power in the international context. For example, in the present Modi government, it has been it is expected or it has been observed that in the international forum the policies are becoming more robust and the country is probably capturing better space in the international market. So, though they have started with various schemes to promote investors from outside to start off business in various firms to have better bargaining power, better terms of trade. So, in the last 5 years the numbers has not been added that much as per the expectations, but still it is expected to have better terms of trade so far as terms of trade discussions are concerned. So, now what about after discussing all those determinants, there are so many other determinants possible, but those are the most important determinants discussed. Now, it attaches with a number of problems. Now, if the quality change, often we expected better quality of trade, but actually quality changes in between. So, these are not yet captured so far as the measurement of terms of trade is concerned. So, you might be asked a question like, out of these what could be the determinant? I mean, suppose you are asked elasticity related questions, elasticity of demand and elasticity of supply and its connection with favorable and unfavorable terms of trade. So, you need to prepare it very correctly to answer the question, because there are certain confusions attached to answer the question. Unless you prepare it correctly, it is too difficult to answer precisely. Similarly, quality matters a lot while discussing the measurement. And similarly, if there has been some changes in the composition of the product or composition of the product being imported or exported, if the composition itself, we imported a product with certain composition of its raw materials, but it has been found later on that the composition has been changed. So, these are not yet captured by different methods of our measurement. So, these should have been highlighted in the research papers. Different research papers actually have been targeting to capture those changes. If there are price differences also, price vary from time to time, price usually vary. So, this there must be a dynamic model to capture the problems. Similarly, weightage. What weight to be taken? We take weight for certain product to get the average. Our measurement of terms of trade is through the weighted average of export and import, export price to import prices, and index of export price to import prices. But do not you think it is just average is not enough, weighted average is enough, it is largely suggested. But what weight should be given? Who are calculating the weights, and is it representing the complete basket of commodities being imported or exported? So, again there are lots of confusion in it. So, therefore, the problems of measurement is identified. Now, another aspect, so far we discussed determinants, some problems related to measurement, and now I am emphasizing on the impacts or the effects of terms of trade. We have already discussed favorable or unfavorable. So, usually terms of trade used to measure in terms of gain or loss in the international trade basket. So, either it is interpreted in terms of favorable or unfavorable term. Now, let us understand the concept with an example. What is called favorable terms of trade? Now, terms of trade becomes favorable for a country if that country's index rises. So, largely corroborated by export prices hike and fall in the import prices. Let us have an example. If the export prices increases by or a price increases by 15%, whereas import prices increases by 5%. Export price increased by 15%, whereas import price increases by 5%. So, in net sense it is favorable TOT, terms of trade, to the country export prices increase by 15%. So, it is not just terms of trade not just calculated by 15% by 5%, rather we have to calculate the net change. Then the index of terms of trade increased from 100 to 109. So, what is the index then? Index is actually export price divided by import price into 100. Okay. Now, the index export price increased by 15%. So, let it be originally it is 100, now it is 115. Now, the new import price is 100 to 105. So, now we have to divide 115 divided by 105. That gives times 100, that gives 109. So, 109 is actually is the rise. So, 9 as against 9% as compared to 100 is the rise in the terms of trade, which is favorable to the terms of trade. So, if you are given an example of calculating terms of trade with the changes, you should not just discuss like 15% divided by 5%, which is roughly given 3% is a wrong answer. It is completely a wrong answer, and so therefore, accordingly we may define it. So, what about unfavorable as against? If it is increased by 5%, I mean if it is 105, 110, now import rises by 10%, whereas export rises by 5%. So, it is the result is it boils down to 95 is less than 100. So, therefore, it is unfavorable. So, we have already discussed these principles of reciprocal demand. We need not emphasize this further because we already discussed earlier as well, but there are large number of assumptions. Reciprocal demand and its elasticity we have already discussed. Now, this one also we have discussed, but let us emphasize again. So far as terms of trade are concerned, net terms of trade and income terms of trade. Net means we are net barter terms of trade. Now, largely from these years till the 12-13 as per the DGCIS report, as I mentioned earlier. So, we have seen that in many years we have negative terms of trade. Okay. And so far as income is concerned, in that year it is negative, in other year it is positive, but most important indicator is net barter terms of trade, largely negative. That means we are more dependent on imports, our import prices are actually higher than that of import prices. The net change is actually negatively impacting the terms of trade. So, last issue to be discussed on emerging rising growth rate, which we have already discussed, but last one to be emphasized here that Professor Jagdish Bhagwati was concerned on this, and because of his theory on this of since developing countries are largely emphasizing or overemphasizing their less efficient industries, and they have since over producing those products, and it has less bargaining power in the international market, and by which the export price is over the time is continually lesser, and thereby reduces the welfare, because the net earning from the income from the trade is quite less. So, you can go through, we have already discussed this earlier, you can go through. So, there are large evidences of deterioration in the international market. Now, recently if you take for example, the terms of trade changes in economic welfare, some of the evidences are very important for Chinese context. Now, one of the paper by Han and Zhang 2012 identifies the fact that changing trend and causes terms of trade in China and studies the overall movement of China's national wealth. One of the very latest paper, very important to refer. Chinese economic growth is not strongly dependent on exports. The export structure of largely labor intensive with low price elasticity, that mainly lead to the continually decline in the terms of trade in China, so far as evidences of terms of trade is concerned. So, however, the loss of welfare from the terms of trade decline is not enough to offset the benefit of the economic growth. The economic growth are actually not due to only the export regions, there are other regions, domestic fundamentals are very strong. So, there is no probability, even it has been clearly mentioned that there is no probability emerging rising growth evidence in Chinese growth foreign trade. So, therefore, terms of trade we have discussed in many forms. We discussed in general equilibrium context, partial equilibrium context, we discussed types, we discussed determinants, we discussed effects. So, I hope you have understood. In the next class next week onwards we will be discussing on policies. Well, so far we discussed theories, empirics, on intra-industry trade. Okay, so many aspects we have discussed. So policies will be unfolded in the next class. So with this, I think I should stop here. We'll continue taking next class. Thank you.